Hi there, Susan Anderson here. We're going to get things started very shortly, so please take this time to ensure you can hear me correctly. You should be seeing the introductory slides to today's webinar, which is to discuss the return to business travel, what we should expect and what we're thinking about for 2022. As people join, might start with a bit of an icebreaker with my two colleagues here that we're talking with, Suzanne Neufang from GBTA and Physititia Grant, who leads travel for Uber. Guys, as we begin to think about 2022, what have you missed the most without travel, and what are you excited to get back? Maybe I'll start with you, Suzanne.
Sure. For me, I think what I miss by being in face-to-face meetings is the ability to whiteboard madly in front of everybody and have everybody at the board putting on their best strategic hat and then doing the post-it notes next to it to be able to start ordering all the opportunities in front of us. I miss that from this virtual area that we are probably the most, just that ad hoc ability to get up and whiteboard.
Yeah, I had a session with some team in our San Francisco office where we're able to do that. And it's so much more effective to getting to answers. Really agree with you. Fiz, what about you?
I think for me, it's two things. The first thing is really getting back out and traveling. And I think the first excitement of getting back on your business trip and getting in the air was the first thing. And the second thing is really that camaraderie with when you're in person, you're talking, there's those impromptu, ideas or, suggestions that come up that when you're talking about a topic or you're sort of initiating some sort of themes. I think just that in-person connection definitely was missed. So those two things for me.
It really resonates. And so I'm seeing that we've got a lot of people on now. So going to get into the meat of this. So welcome everyone. Really delighted for you to join us today to have this discussion between myself and Physititia from Uber, as well as Suzanne from GBTA. We're going to be having a bit of a fireside discussion around some topics, followed by Q&A. And so if you have any questions, they can be submitted via the directions on the screen and at any point through the webinar. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We're going to allow some time at the end of the session to go through as many as we can. And if we can't get to yours, our team is going to follow up via email. So thank you so much for that. Before we start, I might give a little bit of an overview of kind of the speakers today. So we have Suzanne Neufang, who is the CEO of GBTA. Thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time. We have Physititia Grant, who is our global lead at Uber for travel and expense. And so very expert, and we pick her brains a lot about what is happening in the business travel world and making sure that Uber's products are meeting our own needs as well as those as our clients. And I'm Susan Anderson, the global head of Uber for Business. Uber for Business is our Uber's enterprise division. Founded in 2016, focused on how we can work with clients around the world to improve the way that people travel and use Uber's products on the move. So this goes from kind of business travel using our mobility products as well as food while people are traveling. But we also cover things like commute, office meals, event solutions, item delivery, as well as healthcare rides. We're present in 26 countries, working with 150,000 organizations globally. And we're the only platform which has full global coverage, as well as being able to offer solutions across mobility and food delivery, as well as other delivery solutions, which is proving to be really useful for our clients. So today we are going to examine 3 areas. So how are organizations like Uber thinking about the return to travel? It's very much top of everybody's minds around what does this look like and what is the right timing. So we're going to discuss that a bit. Suzanne's going to take us through the GBTA's forecast for 2022 and beyond. As the industry recovers, what is it that you might expect to see? What is it that you're going to see other people doing? And then sustainability in business travel. We've not just paused over the last couple of years during this pandemic. There's been a lot of thinking being done by companies around what does sustainability mean? It's definitely kind of a moment in time. So we're going to discuss those in a little bit more detail. So we're going to go into this fireside chat and start on that topic one, business travel. You know, I'm seeing from my perspective, business travel is on the rise. We know from a survey that GBTA did that 46% of responders plan to resume domestic travel in the near future. In the past 2 months, we're seeing this in terms of what our clients are doing. We're seeing a lot more business airport trips. We're seeing actually a lot of business travel within cities. People are living at pre-pandemic levels. People are back. They are on the move. They want to go and see clients. They want to go and see their teams, but are very much thinking about how do they do this in a way that's safe and sustainable. We're also just seeing beginning of people reopening offices. I'm finding it fascinating. At Uber, we have not yet mandated a full return to office. We're planning to do that at the beginning of next year. But already we're seeing in our offices around the world, people voluntarily coming back in because they want to spend some time with their colleagues and spend some time in that work environment, which is really interesting to see. Maybe I'll pass to you, Physititia. Can you, what are you seeing kind of in terms of how Uber is returning back to travel from our team's perspective?
So we are seeing sort of uptake in travel over the last, several months. I think we're seeing that domestic travel is definitely back and is growing, mostly US domestic travel, but we are also seeing high volumes across EMEA as well. Spend is increasing. I think September marked a big milestone for us from a spend perspective. And we are seeing international travel coming back, especially with the opening of, the US markets early in November. We did see an increase in Australia and Japan. We know that, as things go forward and back with different variants, things are going to be going up and down over the next few months. And we saw an increase in LATAM as well. And from a budgeting perspective, we're kind of also estimating that for H1 at least, we're going to look at like a 30% of 2019 sort of volumes. So we're definitely seeing it on, on an upscale.
And are people within, is our team within Uber traveling for different reasons than before, or kind of what's driving the choices to start traveling again?
I think so. We started off. We started our restart in around July, and we did really say it should be essential travel at the beginning. So essential travel was really like client-facing, critical supplier, regulatory, legal, partnership or deal meetings. So really what we're seeing is it's really BD, business development, sales, and if it's any legal, regulatory policy or comms meetings. And then as countries relax their restrictions, we're starting to see more requests for more sort of in-person meetings, where people are needing to get together for like strategy meetings, product meetings, sort of if there's any sort of launches and things like that. So we are starting to see that, and as we get into next year, we're starting to see our teams planning for sort of Q1 travel next year as well.
Yeah, very interesting. I know I've just been in the UK actually to see family, but also took time to meet the team. And this was the first time in my role that I had met the team in their time zone in person. And the difference of being able to really get into some of the details and meet people and have the time, a little bit more freedom in terms of having a little bit more time with people was really, it was a very good session, very engaging and very worthwhile. Suzanne, I know that GBTA has been tracking this and has some really interesting insights around kind of what the recovery is looking like so far. Maybe you could share some of that with us.
Sure. If I would go maybe fall to fall, so autumn to autumn in the Northern Hemisphere from 2020 to 2021, I think certainly small and medium enterprises led the way initially on a domestic level. And I agree with Physititia that the essential versus non-essential was really a driver for many of those trips back, even 6-9 months ago. I think then when things started looking better over the summer, that opened up a bit more. Certainly some borders opening in Europe specifically helped with some of those numbers for inbound across the board. And city centers are probably still the least populated at the moment. I think tourists have come back, and I don't underestimate the value that people getting out for their first trip in the COVID era it has been for leisure trips, and that gives them a comfort level of actually what they should expect. So I think there's a huge crossover that we shouldn't underestimate with that business to leisure travel influence as well. And then certainly what we've also seen is that as things have picked up, many companies did open up domestic travel. I think our last poll in October still had less than 20% of companies were on a broad scale allowing international travel. Again, it was more for essential and making sure that they knew what to do with the protocols for returning to their home countries. And we'll continue to see some of those fits and starts as we are just now, again, with yet another variant out here, that we will continue to be on a little bit of a roller coaster as we recover.
It really resonates, that link between the leisure as well as business travel. That's exactly what I did this week. One of the changes that Uber introduced during the pandemic as part of our flexible working policy is for people to be able to take 4 weeks to work anywhere where they would like to work. We know we can do it remotely now. I do think that's very interesting then, how people will use that, and we won't be the only company doing that, but taking advantage of being in a place for work purpose, then taking some extra time just to live and be there will be really interesting. And Suzanne, do you know if we're seeing kind of through the end of 2021 and what's being booked into early next year, are we seeing differences in terms of what is being booked and what is in demand in terms of the suppliers and what people are doing?
I think at this point we're still, the demand that we see coming back is really from late January on. We see that there will be some kind of normal that returns in our business travel index research that we just released during our annual convention that had been put on hiatus for 2 years. We are predicting in 2022 that there will be a 38% growth in business travel. So quite a surge after we saw a 54% decrease year over year from 20 to 21. And this year globally, only a 14% bump up. So the fact that some airlines have said that they're at 90% capacity, that is largely taken up by the leisure traveler. But what we also see then going forward is then a 24%. And so we see year over year after next year, it slows down just slightly, but still really great numbers. And as we get to the end of 2024, beginning of 2025, we should see a global number that actually starts to match 2019 again. So there will be, similar to recoveries in 2008 through 2010, and even before that, the 9/11 era in 2001, that it doesn't come back in 1 year. It comes back in, a bit of a hockey stick at the beginning, and then it levels up a little bit. And by 2025, we'll probably be back to the 5%, 4 to 5% year, 3 to 5% year over year growth that we had been seeing in 2018 and before that.
Yeah, that's very interesting because, yeah, like you say, we've been here before. We've seen these variations. It's just around that coming back. So yeah, we're now talking about looking forward, business travel in 2022 and beyond. So Physititia, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about within Uber, how are we planning for what we are going to be working with our teams and looking for them to be doing as part of their business travel beyond 2022?
So I think in terms, what we did is we do a biannual customer satisfaction survey, and some to do with that, we also ask some questions to get some insights in terms of what the demand of travel will look like. So I think our last results were in sort of October timeframe. And just to give some quick stats, 40% of our traveling employees said that they would take a domestic trip in the next 6 months. 20% there said they are likely to take an international trip, and 20% said that they're likely to attend conferences and conventions. So the appetite for travel is definitely there, and our aim is to really go into, there was a kind of a phase 1 of the restart of travel, which was the essential travel, and as countries relax their restrictions further, we want to go into more of a phase 2. So we're looking at restarting in a safe way, but making sure people make the smart choices around their trips, and making sure they have the right resources. I think the right resources and the information is key. I think one of the key things for me when I went to GBTA, and it was so great to be at GBTA and meet everyone and be there, was the actual checking process of when I was going through the airport. So I found that the whole digital passport, the digital vaccine passport in Europe, it's pretty, there's a QR code, it's really easy when between different regions. So obviously the US probably has a different process, APAC, so between Europe and the US, that's when it started to get a bit sticky. So when I was checking in with the US, that was they were really anxious. It's, all the information of the different governments of where you need to what the testing is, what the vaccine requirements are. So I think that having the resources and the right information to our travelers is going to be key as we start, starting travel again. But we definitely want to, I think we're definitely going to see an uptake next year. And we've had requests for people really wanting to get together, have group meetings, have summits, and restart business travel.
I think that really resonates. I know, having just flown from the UK, well, from the US to the UK back here, where I was vaccinated actually in Australia. So it's the paperwork and the admin related to business travel has substantially increased. I was always one which was arriving at airports pretty close to flight taking off. If I had to sit down before I started boarding, I was there too early kind of mindset. Definitely not the mindset anymore. And I think, we're increasingly seeing kind of the reservations on Uber, people really reserving their Ubers, thinking early, thinking about how long does it take to get to the airport? How long do I take? Because there's just more questions around what might you need to have, which is very interesting. Suzanne, you must be seeing this with your clients, kind of when people are thinking about what do these new mandates, thinking about vaccinations, testing, kind of other compliance. Are you seeing any interesting tools or processes or approaches that people are taking to try and help people navigate?
Well, certainly, I think it fundamentally, one of the good things that we are involved in is that advocating at a very basic level with policymakers globally in all of the regions that you talked about, to make sure that the rules don't become so onerous that it prohibits travel completely. And I think one of the things that we've been a very strong proponent of for these 2 years has been providing risk mitigation at the individual level rather than the blanket lockdowns, which have been certainly isolationist in the way that they look at things. And as a travel industry, with supply chain concerns that the entire globe has at this time, we know that some of that is indeed because people can't get where they need to go to enable the goods and the other services to be able to flow around the world. So the entry point and the way things work has been another thing that we've been involved with, both in advocating with the European digital health passes to make sure that they are readable across various borders. And the latest stat that I heard this week was that the European health passes are now recognized across dozens of non-EU countries. And that has been a real success for all of them, because if If you have your QR code, you have a pass. I live in the state of New York, so New York has its own, but it's a little bit of a United States of chaos in the United States at the moment as well. If you leave our borders, you have a different rule in every state that you go to for what you can actually do when you're there. So I think that ability to look at what are the rules, at least on a national border basis. We partnered with American Airlines on our website to be able to put Sherpa in front of all of our members so that there is an easy way for up-to-date information about the crossing of the border discussion that we were hoping was going to go away after November 8th, but clearly we're back into that same conversation again. Yeah,
it's fascinating, and definitely there's work that needs to get done to kind of clarify and simplify over time. I think GBTA has also done a study here, kind of asking people around, how are people feeling about vaccination rates? Are you able to share some of the insights there? Because I think that was pretty fascinating.
Sure. We know that from our monthly COVID-19 study of the industry itself, that we're a highly vaccinated industry. And it was always great to get that number that kept going up, even from July, where vaccines weren't available everywhere, to the end of, I believe in our September survey was the last time we asked that question. And we were at the 90% with at least one shot, and really 85% were fully vaccinated of those who were responding. And that was both a buy side as well as a supply side. Now, that's not business travelers. So we queried business travelers as well, and we commissioned a study that in October, that was part of what we released at our annual event in Orlando in mid-November. And we learned there that 70% of business travelers are actually vaccinated as well. So that is a higher than average for national averages that we're tracking like crazy. It's not perfect. And regionally, there was a wide diversity in that number. So actually the US lags, US brings that number down. Canada was super high because, of course, in Canada, you need to be vaccinated to get on an airplane. And then in other parts of the world, it varied between that as well, fairly high in APAC by October as well among those business travelers. And I think what was also really connected to that business traveler study was that 54% missed traveling, which was interesting. And by far the biggest age quadrant that missed traveling were the ones that were below 40 years old. So it's the younger ones that really, the young career professionals or the early mid-year career professionals that really see business travel as a way for them to get their business objectives done and to move up and forward and, achieve good things through developing relationships and having face-to-face meetings.
Yeah, fascinating. So vaccine mandates and there's been a lot in the press. It's a very hot topic around how our companies and travel companies and the policies in place there. I know you recently ran GBTA. Maybe you can talk, Suzanne, about how you're thinking about that, and what are the policies that we're seeing emerging as part of what could be thought about as best practice as people get back to business travel and have safety top of mind.
Sure. Certainly, some of our member companies who are airlines have mandated that their employees get vaccinated, and some of them have had very good success with that. I think in other cases, we see in the courts that there are some decisions that are happening there. With our own event, because of the rules in Florida, we weren't able to mandate vaccines, but I know other large travel related events, maybe in the meeting space or in the that might be customer event oriented, did mandate vaccines beginning really in August when I started attending some of these meetings in person. And so instead we required a test in lieu of vaccination, but you could get out of showing the test, which may of course now become a change as well with the national discourse of every region, really in every country, making up its own mind now about vaccine mandates. You have the boosters that are also going to come into question as well. Does your original vaccination expire at a certain point that is earlier than was originally known? And now do you need to get that booster to be considered fully vaccinated at this point? We had a mask requirement as well at the in-person event. That was super hard to mandate, and eating, drinking, anybody who was walking around with a bottle of water was certainly able to make their own rules for that. But still, I think the good outcome, and I think for us, it's coming up on that deadline now of that 2-week period after the event, and thankfully, you know, we only heard about a very few number of cases that were positive as a result of leaving, and we notified all attendees as part of the protocols today to make sure that they also, if they worry, get tested, make sure that you're not ill, what was then going into a major US holiday as well. So for us, it's really, you know, public health. We were never in the public health business before. And now anybody who's in the business travel industry is actually in a public health facing situation that we need to be following the rules and making sure, of course, that we're keeping everybody out of harm's way.
I think that's exactly right. We're all amateur epidemiologists nowadays and really understanding this. And during the pandemic and today, if you're in an Uber, we are mandating that our driver partners are wearing masks and that people have to wear masks in order to, you know, have that mutual respect and protection for people to feel they can be comfortable in the cars. And to come into our offices for our team members, we are asking people to either have, you know, uploaded a vaccine, proof of vaccination, or to have a negative test. Again, kind of on my most recent travels, and, you know, with some upcoming travel I have internationally, part of the requirement is a negative COVID test before you get on a plane. It's been very interesting kind of thinking, well, what happens if I get a positive test and I'm not in my home country? How does that navigate? What does that look like for cancellations? Physititia, maybe you can like share, how are you thinking about that in terms of our cancellation policies and how we're going to support team members who might have the dreadful situation of being away from home, getting a positive test, not being able to come back? How are you considering the support that we put in place?
So I think, you know, during this whole process, airlines have started to be very flexible with their cancellation policies, and they've worked you work very closely with your preferred partners, and they've been very good in terms of, you know, being able to rebook travel. So from that perspective, I think having to cancel and rebook has become much easier. In terms of supporting our employees, I've been working very closely with our HR team and our travel security team. So obviously the first thing is from a travel security team is that one, firstly, making sure, if you know, trying to see, you know, can we get them home? Can we get people home quickly? Working with our travel security third-party supplier. If people do have to quarantine, from a company perspective, we're going to support them. We're going to make sure we book them the accommodation, that everything's going to be paid for. We're going to give them a HR contact who is going to be their main POC whilst they're having to quarantine. So we know that, to be honest, it's likely that it's going to happen, right? So we want people to travel safe. This is the first for everyone. So likely it's going to happen, but we just want to make sure we have the resources, the touch points there, and key contacts for our employees so that they feel supported whilst they're traveling. So you have your pre-trip information, your on the trip support with, you know, both the travel and the travel security teams and HR, and the post-trip support as well. So we're hoping to have enough support on the trip from, you know, working together with travel security and HR so that our travelers feel supported. And once they have quarantine, we can get them back home quickly.
That's it's great. I'm really glad personally to see that, and know for our team there's a lot of appreciation. But it's I think this will be interesting to see how this goes in 2022, because then a lot of last minute extension of hotel rooms or like moves of flights, it's going to be a little bit, we're all going to need to be a lot more flexible in how we want to think about our schedules, which will be interesting. So maybe kind of we'll think about kind of other trends kind of in the future. Sustainability being one of the key areas. You know, that is a term that is bandied around a lot. Suzanne, kind of when you think about kind of sustainability, how do you think that's defined in business travel?
So it's interesting, you know, public companies such as yours would have ESG guidelines for all of the things that govern the environment and social causes, right? Sustainability, we think about climate change as a very important thing, and certainly within travel and aviation, hotels and car rental and car ground services, that there is always an aspect of climate change, but then that's certainly a big piece of it. But the other side is talent, that there's the people aspect of sustainability as well, and making sure that we have both an industry that takes all of those considerations into play when someone is choosing their partners or choosing where and how to travel, that those are considerations that play a part. I think what it's really important to do, and as we chart the path with COP26 just finishing in Glasgow, that there is a path that the world's largest and smaller economies are pacing themselves toward 2040, 2050, and making sure that we have the goals in place. And we as an industry need to get on that path as well. So we've been announcing some very important initiatives, of which Uber is a part as well. Thank you very much to help us set that measurement, the pacing, the goal setting, the accountability, that we then can let media and policymakers know that we as a business travel industry, we're a small portion of what is that overall mobility space. There's cargo, there's all kinds of other things within the metrics that belong there, but business travel certainly needs to do our part so that we are part of the answer and the solution, and not just look to by doing nothing in 2035 as being the sole part of the problem. So we want to be leading this charge rather than be taking a back seat.
Yeah, very much that's how Uber's thinking around this. We participated in COP in Glasgow, have a lot of investments happening within the sustainability space. For instance, we've launched our Uber Green product, which is electric vehicles, which we're seeing a big spike in take up, particularly for business travel. We see a lot with clients they know their employees would like an option to be able to use a more sustainable travel option. The EVs is a great way to keep carbon emissions lower, and we're investing heavily to get more supply on the roads with commitments in many countries around moving our full supply to be fully electric in the near future. And the other thing we're seeing a lot is that, as you talked about, Suzanne, that need for the metrics and the measurement to be there. And so seeing a lot of demand from clients, which we'll be working on and getting a product live in 2022 around how do you track carbon emissions that are being used when you use Uber for Business, so that they can begin to understand the impact of their teams, but also then we plan to work with them to try to reduce and over time meet the overall goals. So very interesting space. And as someone who likes living on this planet, I'm really glad to see kind of the amount of movement that is happening across corporates in this space. I
think the one other thing I would note here is that we have probably a bigger impact than just an individual leisure traveler could. So with the buying power of your own program that Phys oversees and all of your clients, we can actually have a bigger, faster impact by demanding and being part of that buying solution, whether it's sustainable aviation fuels on the plane that they're traveling in, or the collection of EVs that they could be part of for their ground transportation needs. And I think we can't underestimate that for once we may have a bigger seat at the table with policymakers, with media, because of the collective buying power that we have as an industry. And I think that's really, really something that I want to stress here as well.
Yeah, it gives us all a responsibility. Phys, kind of how are you thinking about this within kind of the policies that we're setting for our own team?
So I think we've definitely got sustainability as a focus and a priority in our goals for next year. And one thing, key thing that came up within GBTA, and I think it's for all companies, is like progress, not perfection, right? You need to just start somewhere. So I think for us, as you said, in terms from the data perspective, phase one for us in terms of reducing our environmental impact is tracking and measuring. and we're working very closely with our TMCs with that. So we really want to equip our travelers to make smarter choices around their sort of travel selection. So our goal, you know, in terms of short to mid-term goal, is really to look at reducing and avoiding our environmental impact and emissions, and then longer term is looking at sort of offsetting opportunities once we have some more of the data. So three of our key goals. One is obviously, as I said, CO2 reporting, working closely with our sustainability committee that we have internally and our green teams. We're working with our TMC on online booking tool configurations, and that's with air, hotel, and rail. So you've got areas where you can highlight CO2 emissions on flights. We want to look at where we can transition from air to rail on specific routes, whether it's either domestically or intra-regionally as well. And we want to look at putting a goal where we have 25% of our managed spend with green travel suppliers. So those are our initial goals. And then that's kind of phase one. Phase two will be really looking at sort of offsetting, because we kind of need to build the foundation, get the data, and then look at what is the next stage of really driving that reduction as well.
Great program. I mean, so thank you so much. We'll move on to Q&As, but I think, the themes that we're talking around, the sustainability, flexibility, safety, going to stay with us into 2022. But human nature has not changed. We know that we want to see our teammates. We know we want to see our clients. There is certain work that is just better and more effectively done in person, and just interesting for all of us to find that balance around when is the travel the right thing, and how do we help our teams set up and have the right processes in place. So exciting times. I'm optimistic. So we've got a few questions that have come in. I'm gonna pick a couple. So this is an interesting one. With the rise of the Omicron variant, how are we thinking about preparing or adapting orgs to the new variations, and any advice? Maybe I'll start. I know that we've begun to see this come over the last week or so. Right now, we're not seeing impact in terms of changes in customer behaviors in terms of usage of products. I think it's one of those pieces where it's a little bit of watch and see. I think what we are likely, I think our perspective at this point is it's likely this variant is more well known than we thought. This is typically what's happened before. The point at which we notice it's already in many places, not just in one part of the world. What's positive is we've not seen the hospitalization rates going up, so it gives a little bit of optimism, but obviously not an expert in health, and we'll wait to hear what the experts say. And so continuing to be aware and thoughtful of this, but continuing to encourage vaccinations and the safety protections that we talked about as being the current path. Suzanne, have you got any thoughts from a GBTA perspective?
I think it would be stressing again what I said earlier, that we've come out with a statement that basically says, please don't everybody lock down again, that we've come so far. We are not in the same place as we were in February or March of 2020. Vaccinations are indeed in arms, many arms. And while it's not in at the rate that we need them globally, now we need to focus on getting everybody access to vaccinations. And I think that really is another public policy approach that we are taking, that we need to make sure that vaccinations are available everywhere, because the variants will keep coming as long as there aren't vaccination-rich countries aren't sharing with vaccination-poor countries. I think beyond that, I would say that travelers and their travel managers like you, Physititia, need to do your due diligence for the kind of international border crossings that may happen, and even domestic policies if there's some changes domestically, which was one of the reasons why we changed our Berlin plans, is that the Berlin Senate was actually saying that events over 200 people should not even be happening. So that is something that we all need to be aware of as we're still working on the regrouping of events and meetings and business travel getting back on the road again. So it can be done safely. I think all of us who have been traveling, you're part of this too, Susan, and UFIS from being in the US, that I think we can also show and also be an ambassador for how travel can happen safely.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think, we've come so far. There are going to be potentially other challenges that we're going to see over the course of the next, 6 months, year, that we're just going to have to look at what solutions or what creative solutions to solve for those. I think for us, working very closely with our travel security team, we put in place, we've moved away from high risk, low risk, and we've moved to something called sort of restricted travel destinations, because we want to move away from those terms. But we work very closely with them to monitor what our advanced bookings look like, where people are going. If people have booked to somewhere where it looks like it's restricted, then we need to reach out, we need to do something about it, either cancel that trip or provide some more information. I think monitoring our travel trends, information before the trip, because obviously people are going to go on and they're going to make bookings. Making sure on the online booking tool, you've got pop-up information, resources where people can kind of pushes out to them, provides those notifications when they're traveling. They're not always going to know where there's restrictions, so we're trying to provide the information and reach out and notify as we can, and as fast as we can when things change.
I think that's right. So we'll fingers crossed that we learn more and as we go through this. So another interesting question here, where should organizations begin with sustainability practices for business travel? Do either of you have perspectives there? What should the first step be?
So I think from I suppose a buyer perspective, I think where we mentioned before around it's really around the visibility, right, and around tracking and measuring, having that data, and then you're able to put in those initiatives. So you're able to put in initiatives around offsetting, or having a green supplier program, or even working with some of the offsetting partners, and I know one of the big things at GBTA was SAF as well, the sustainable aviation fuel, and looking longer term at how we can use our programs to move more into using those sort of sustainable fuel sources than what we have now. So I think it's a stepping stone, and you look at it in phases, and if you haven't started, just start making that progress. You can work with your TMC. All TMCs will have sustainability initiatives and objectives at different levels that they can propose. So work with your account managers and your TMCs, and also internally within the companies if there's any green committees, as well as GBTA, right? GBTA is our association, so they're literally on the ball with everything to do with sustainability. We had a big, really great sessions on sustainability at convention as well. So people can go back and watch the streaming, right, Suzanne, as well? Because
Indeed, that streaming is available, and I think there's so much great information there from both the main stage as well as what would be the workshops that are really, really, it's a long-term project, but we need to get started. I think, over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll be doing our best through the sustainability committee that's part of GBTA to also give buyers toolkits, be able to give benchmarking standards for ways to measure as well, much like we've set the standard for hotel RFP in the past. I think now it's very important from a sustainability perspective to do the same thing, give toolkits, be able to both educate ourselves, and then ultimately we're looking to make sure that we can certify that knowledge and be able to let you be an expert within the industry and your own company. If you don't have a green team on your team already, that you would be able to be the start of that within your own company as well.
Great advice. Thank you so much. Maybe I think we've got time for one last question. Are there any international locales that you're expecting to see more travel in versus less? Is there any geographical patterns that you're expecting to see next year?
I think if I take that, I think when the one data point that I haven't touched on is that along with the business travelers, we also sent a survey to finance leaders from companies from around the world, and we touched on all 4 regions. And all of the regions indicated that their economies would be in a much better shape domestically next year than they were this year. And so there's a great deal of optimism there, which I think bodes well for almost all regions. If we can get the fear and the panic sort of under control for every variant that comes out and have a standard approach that helps us predict what and how travel will continue, I think then that will bode well for the kind of essential or half essential trips to continue, and for the other things where C-levels need to see their people and need to build relationships with customers and their staff. I think it's really just in my view really dangerous for us to let people have started their job in the age of COVID and to never have met colleagues. I think it doesn't bode well for longevity at any company for those employees. And I think that's part of what we owe as well within this business travel sphere, that we shouldn't also just automatically say no internal travel, because some of that internal travel is good ultimately for your customers and for your shareholders. And so that would be my closing line as well.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And it's how we're thinking about running Uber for Business globally in terms of our teams, which is we know that we want our work to be more than just what you show up and do for 8 hours against a set of tasks. It's around the relationships, career development, coaching, networks, and the social aspects of working. So we're going to be very conscious actually in all locales to think about what the local atmosphere and culture and response to COVID is. It's very different in the UK and how people in the UK think about this versus Australia versus the US versus Japan, for instance. There's a very local nuance to how people feel and what feels acceptable. But what is consistent is hearing this appetite to travel, to meet, to spend time, but be thoughtful about it. So I think we'll have a bit more structure around having regular team in-person, all hands and time together, where we use that to really invest in learning and development, teamwork, relationship building, and less kind of expecting that to be the day-to-day that happens Monday to Friday, week in, week out, which I think is a really great opportunity for us to enhance how it feels. So that's how I'm thinking about it. So I think we're pretty much at time for here. So I just want to say thank you so much to Physititia and to Suzanne for joining us today and taking the time. I hope this has been interesting. I know we have a lot of questions that I didn't manage to get to. We will kind of follow up with you on answers to some of those. So thank you. Happy, safe, sustainable travel all.